Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmenencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. Tonight's guest is Kat Taylor. Kat, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Kat, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm 55, mother of 2 grown kids now, married for over 20-something years, and country girl from way back. So that's about what I am, still country.
Still country and a country girl from way back, huh?
Oh, yeah, on the farm.
Nothing wrong with that. When did you first hear the term Dogman, Kat?
Well, it was your show, actually. I was looking for something to call this Dogman thing. It wasn't a Bigfoot, but I was listening to your show. So a few years back, it was your show.
Okay, not that long ago then.
Mm-mm.
You moved to Boonville, Arkansas in 1998, and almost right away, strange things started to happen around your home. What kinds of strange things were happening?
Well, we were out in this shed that was behind our house, and we were getting it ready, cleaning it, kind of straightening things up. So we were putting our trash can, is a big, huge trash can. We kept dog food in it, and we were putting that in the shed. So my husband was out cleaning it up. So the next day I went out while he was still in there, and I noticed that there was this scratch on top of this building. You know how wood is when it's weathered, it gets gray? Well, this is a fresh scratch on this building. I'm over 5'5", so I couldn't reach it, just barely reach it and stick my fingernails in the scratch mark. Started out with 3, and then it singled out and went all the way across this building, and then it went and had 2 nail marks at the end. And I asked my husband, I said, look at this. And he looks out and he looks down because it was a high building. And he looked out and he's like, I don't know how that got there, because I asked him if he did it. And I thought, well, maybe our neighbor went by with a tractor or something and it caught it and it drug it across, because this was really deep. So that's when I started noticing odd things that I could not explain. And this was in Boonville, Arkansas.
That is pretty strange. How close or far away were your neighbors back then?
Goodness. It was like we lived in a suburban area. I had a neighbor that was just, I probably could throw a ball and hit her house. But then we had, behind our house, there was a cliff. And you could look up the cliff and you could see houses all up in there throughout the trees and stuff. That's where the people actually lived. We lived on the outskirts of Boonville. So, I mean, way far up the cliff, there was people that lived up there, but I didn't have anything to do with those people, but they lived up above us. So it was kind of like a country lane and pasture area that I lived in.
Sounds like a nice area to me.
Yeah, I still kind of like it. I don't live there anymore, but I like the area.
I can understand that. It does sound nice. Not long after moving into your first house, you moved into a second home down the road. Why'd you move?
Well, mainly the house that we lived in was cold. And the house that was down the road, it was a warmer house. And I was concerned because it was finances mostly. It was the heat in the winter. So that was why we moved out of that house, the first house. And it was just down the road. So it's like 1, 2, 3 houses down.
Wow, that was right down the road, not far.
Not far at all, no.
Not long after you moved to that area, you started noticing some strange signs people had posted in that area. Please tell us about them.
We would go out driving in the country, and that was kind of like a pastime. And we was trying to find a house to buy out in the country or rent. We kind of wanted to get a little bit farther out of town because we're country people. And so we would ride out in the country. And since we don't know the area, you just take a back road and just drive. That's just the beauty of country driving, you know. we were going down this one road and we went through like an opening and it was gravel and we kept going and we seen a sign and the sign was painted red, solid red, and it had a black skull and bones on it. And I told my husband, I said, I've never seen a sign that's so scary as that because it didn't have no writing on it whatsoever. And it was up kind of high in the trees. It wasn't posted like it's posted land or anything like that. It was in a tree up high. And it took us forever to find a way to turn around and come back out there because skull and bones, that's pretty obvious that that's dangerous. And it wasn't an old sign. I don't think it was old. There was nothing that looked old about it. And also when we were out, I seen another sign in the same kind of area, and it was on the side of the road. It wasn't even in an area that you were driving in, like you don't supposed to belong. We were just on the road, the gravel road driving. And it was in the trees, and it had, I don't know what the writing was. I think, I'm not quite remembering the writing, but it did have something on it. And it was a brown figure on it, like a warning sign. And I didn't know what that was. I can't recall if it had ears. All I know, it was brown and it looked like an animal head. It was just the head part of it. And so those things, I was like, yeah, they got the strangest way of putting signs out here, to warn people to, it's dangerous or whatever. I thought that was the oddest way, but it was an eye catcher. Let's put it that way. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. So I never put 2 + 2 together. That was my problem when I first moved there. It's like I never realized this was an issue that was a lot bigger than what I ever expected it to be. And also, when I moved in the first house, there was some noise that was happening, and I couldn't put my finger on it, whether it was human or whether it was an animal. And I remember asking, what is that noise? I couldn't. It was like almost something angry. It was like there was like a scream, but anger. It sounded like something was mad, an animal or person. And I couldn't, to this day, I couldn't tell you even how it sounded. All I know is I was trying to get a distinguishing of what was it. And when I looked up, I went out the back and I looked up and I was looking at the houses that were above us on the cliff above us. And as I was looking, there's this guy that comes out of his garage and he pops the trunk of his car and he said to another guy that was next to him, I'm tired of this, or something to that point. He was tired of something and he picked a gun up out of the trunk of his car. And I thought, ooh, must be people, and ooh, I hope nothing's bad, because I didn't know exactly where it was. But then as soon as he did that, underneath the man, under the cliff, like his house is here and then it's like 20 or 30 feet below that, that's when the noise happened. And I'm like, well, that wasn't that guy. That must be an animal. I couldn't tell you what it was. I do think it was one of these creature things, which I had no idea what they were. And also an odd thing, we had a Rottweiler. He was chained to the back, and he was a full-size Rottweiler, big dog. And one day I had my husband out there because I smelled something dead. It was like something died out here and the dog has rolled in it. Because dogs roll in dead stuff. That's just a given, So I had my husband out there with a shovel trying to find the dead thing that was out there. This was about when they started, whatever it is, had marked that shed. So my husband's out there and he's like, no, honey, I don't see nothing. I'm like, it smells like death out here. So something was smelling like death out there. I don't know if they had been up there messing with my dog or what it was, but something had been out there and there was no evidence of anything dead that my husband could find, or he was going to bury it. So that was in the first house. And when I lived in that house, right across the road was a pasture, and it had cows and so country, it's like a bunch of cows. The guy had a bunch of cows out there. And when I moved next to the end of the pasture, 3 houses down next to the end of this pasture. So I lived next to a pasture. So that's the odd thing. And another thing, when we first moved to Boonville, I wasn't familiar with the mountains like the Ozarks and the Ouachita. And when it thundered, it would thunder and echo back and forth. It was like you got a wave of thunder, like it'd thunder here and then it'd thunder over there and it'd come back and it would echo back and forth. So I wasn't familiar. It was like when it stormed and it was like, wow, I'm in a new world here. Because it was like it echoed back and forth. But when we first moved into this house, our first house, soon as it got to be thundering and the lightning started, we lived I'd say about 40 something miles away from the Air Force Base. They would start doing night maneuvers. And they would fly, and you'd think you'd have a tornado because you wasn't familiar with any of this noise that was happening. But they would fly in one direction. You could tell that they were fighter jets. They would fly very low over the house, and you'd swear that they were coming in the house and just crashing into you. And they would keep it up. So we get like 2 or 3 storms that week. They were very violent. I mean, the lightning was like truly just crazy. And they would come through, and it was like they had only come in one direction. And I think, and I could be wrong, but I think this is when these things showed up. It happened about the same time. It's like they moved these things in, or it made them, these night maneuvers things, scared them enough to where they moved territory. Because I didn't notice it at first. And as soon as the planes would fly over during these thunderstorms, that's when those things come in. And on top of that, I don't know if they knew and they were moving them in that area because that cliff stopped them, more or less from getting with the people. But I do think it's kind of deliberate because, it didn't happen all the time. Like it stormed afterwards and then they never did do night maneuvers. You never seen, because it was in a no-fly zone. You never seen planes. Did not see a plane in the area. It was in a no-fly zone. So if you did see one, it had to be Air Force or something, military. So that was the only time that we ever heard, or I ever heard anything. And it was at those night maneuvers that they were having when we first moved there. And that's when strange things started showing up afterwards.
Wow, Kat, that sure does sound like a strange area to me.
It's nice. It's nice. And it's like wooded. Arkansas is beautiful, especially in that area. And yeah, it's just a beautiful area to live in.
Oh, it sounds like a beautiful area. I love the idea of having cows right across the road from you. Doesn't get any better than that, but when you start seeing those signs posted and you've got those strange sounds, the strange noises, the sound upset and problems like that, yeah, that's when it kind of isn't all that great of a place to be around, it sounds like.
Well, I didn't have any fear. Even with the signs, I had nothing to fear. I mean, yeah, maybe if there was a bear or something, you would like, oh, be careful. But I didn't have a fear until afterwards. So there was no fear. Even though I could hear something strange, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel fear until after I saw.
Until after you realized what was going on. No, that makes good sense.
Yeah.
All right, Kat, let's talk about that first experience you had. You had a nightmarish experience 2 weeks after you moved into your new home. Please tell us what happened. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Well, I think it was on the weekend because my kids had it off. I had 2 young boys, 6 and 9, young kids, and we were getting around. My husband, he had gone home. We lived in Carlisle, so he went home to visit family that was there. And I sent him home with all the guns because he was going to shoot guns with my brother. And I said, take all the guns with you inside of men because we had moved a couple times. And, they need to be sighted in anyways. So I told him to take all the guns. So we loaded his truck up with guns. And they probably thought he was a gun runner by the time he got there. They pulled him over. But anyways, we loaded his truck down with guns and I sent him off. So it was just me and the kids. And we were getting around. We were going to watch a movie. So I was fixing to get in there and make some popcorn because we were really going to watch a movie with popcorn and the whole 9 yards. And as I was in the kitchen, the cow, we had calves out there. You could see mother and calves out there, And I lived so close to the pasture, you could throw a potato and it would land out there in the pasture. Cows could eat it, If I had a bad potato, I just threw it out there. So, I lived really close to this pasture. And I heard a mother calf, and I thought, something's messing around, because she was kind of like, we raise cows, so you kind of know a stressed mother sound. And I thought, wow, there must be some coyotes, but I haven't heard any coyotes. I didn't even hear wolves. No coyotes, no wolves in this area. So I'm like, there must be a coyote, but I couldn't remember ever hearing it howl, because usually they'll start yipping and they'll start doing all kinds of coyotes. We lived around coyotes. And it started, I'm thinking, okay, I need to scare this off. And I'm thinking, okay, I didn't hear no coyotes yipping. You just can't go out there and yell and scream at them, to make them go away, because the growl was getting more intense. But the mother was kind of like bellowing, and you can hear her rustling around, like running or kicking or something. You know how it is. They'll start kicking and walking back. She'll start walking in circles, kicking with whatever is messing with her. I think that's what it sounded like that she was doing, is she kind of was moving around, and you can hear her rustling around and hear her kind of bawling. So it started a growl, and it just wasn't a coyote. So I had one stinking gun in the house, and I called it the goose gun, because I could take my hand and hold the barrel standing up, and it still have room to go over. And it was so big that my husband didn't carry that. He wasn't about to shoot that gun and sight that in. It's not necessary. It's just an extremely long gun. Will not even fit in a gun cabinet. That's how huge this gun is. I had that gun, and I thought, okay, I guess I'll have to get this gun out. So as I went in my room to get the gun, I knew that we were in trouble, because I could hear the calf getting taken at that time. And the calf bellowed. It didn't bellow very long. It just bellowed one time. And so I was gathering the kids up, and I was going to the opposite room, which was my bedroom. And I went in the bedroom, and I was looking for shells for this gun. So I'm going through my dresser. I always have shells like laying everywhere. And I'm like looking for shells to fit this gun. And I found one, and I loaded the gun, and I found another one. And by that time, the growling was very intense. And I set my kids down, and I was getting worried, because my little one, he was tiny, and I stuck him under my arm on one side against the dresser, because this barrel was so long. I wasn't about to go outside, because by the time I got to the bedroom and found the shell, I realized this was not a coyote. This was something that I didn't know what it was, and it was dangerous. So I had my little one under my arm, and my oldest one, I had him by the door. As I was sitting there, and I had this gun, and I'm instructing my oldest, don't run in front of the gun, because I've got to swing the gun to the door. If it come in the door, I have to swing the gun that way. And I was trying to do it in a quiet manner, because I knew that this was an animal. I only heard one. This was an animal. It was very big. The roar was too big. The roar was just like immense. And it started growling even louder. And as I sat there, I looked up and realized that my bedroom did not have a curtain on it. I like to die. And the lights were on. You could see right in, like anybody standing there. That was the only window that I did not have a curtain for yet. To this house I moved into, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, common sense would have made you shut the light off, but it would have been too scary, honestly. And I'm not scared of the dark, but at this point in time, I would have been too scared. My kids would have just freaked if I shut the light off so I could see. Because I'm country. I mean, I like to go out at night and everything. Not anymore, but. So as I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to instruct my kids of what to do, I felt like we were under attack. Because the roar got so much, I could feel it in my chest. And it started roaring louder. And I say roar, growling is what I mean. It's a growl. It wasn't a roar, it was a growl. Now, I've heard bear. My sister owned a bear, okay? So I know what a bear sounds like. My sister even owned, same sister, we call her Dr. Seuss. She even owned a cougar. So it was like, I know what a big cat sounds like. It did not end in a sound like a cat. It did not. This thing was just getting so loud, I felt it in my chest. And my kids were trembling. You could feel them trembling. And I'm looking at the window, thinking, I don't even have a curtain. So I'm up again, trying to make my kids stand still, because I'm looking for more shells, because I only had 2 shells. And finally, I realized that I didn't have any more shells for this gun. We moved, so it was like some of this stuff wasn't unpacked yet. You know, it could have been in the gun cabinet. I don't know where the shells were to this gun. All I could find was 2. And this got so loud, I sat back down, and I heard another voice in a distance, another growl in a distance. And it got closer, and it got closer. And there was 2 very distinct growls. And they both continued to growl. And I didn't feel it so much in my chest as I did the very first growl, the very first, whatever killed this animal. That growl was really, really, it vibrated in my chest. The second growl, they were growling together. And there is nothing that puts a fear in you like the feeling of growling that you don't know what's growling. Yes, I know that it was outside. Yes, I know my door was locked. But I felt like we were in a war because I didn't know. And then I heard another one come up. I heard another one growl. It growled just like the other one at a distance, and I heard it come up. And then they started ripping. You could hear them pull the meat, the flesh of this calf. They were pulling it apart. You could hear them. It was like they had it between them, and they were just like pulling limb for limb. And my youngest says, "What about Pete Dog?" which is our Rottweiler outside, because he was barking a little bit before that, but he wasn't making a sound. And I said, it's too late. If he's outside, it's too late. So they were crying, and I don't know what I was doing. I don't know what my expression was. I have no idea what I was doing. All I could think of is, I don't have enough shells. There's no way that I could protect my kids. I don't have enough shells because there's 3 and I only have 2 shells. I only prayed. I said, God, I just said, I hope that by the time they get done, they're full. But I didn't know what they were. And you could hear them crunch the bones like they were eating corn nuts. It was like they chewed the bones up like it was nothing but corn nuts, just crunch. That was it. They ate. You could hear them eating this calf. And I can only think that I hope they're full by the time they get done. And I hope there's not any more. And I didn't know what they were. I knew they weren't a bear. I could tell by the roar. And I knew they weren't a cat, because a cat's roar, even when they feed, has a snarl at the end. And these didn't sound like that. And there was definitely 3. So we sat there, and I was telling my kids they couldn't make a noise. I felt like that mother that wanted to smother her kids so the kids wouldn't make a noise. But they had enough sense, thank goodness, to be quiet. Because I told them, I said, they're like a dog. I didn't know what they were. I had no idea. But all I know is a dog can hear a lot, a long ways away. A dog has very sensitive hearing. So our kids knew that, and it was like, they're like a dog. They can hear. They're an animal. They can hear you. So you have to be very quiet. And I was telling Alan that I'm going to swing the gun that way. Don't get up and run. Because he wouldn't, if I had him on the other side next to the youngest, he couldn't hold the youngest down if he saw it. I didn't know what it was. I was just planning for the worst. And I didn't have enough shells. It got quiet. So we waited there. We sat there, and I'm looking at the window, and I'm waiting for something to show up in the window, because the window was high enough that a head could fit in. I didn't know what they were. I still was looking at the window, and it got very still. In about 30 minutes, I thought, okay, I'm going to go stick my head out the door. I wanted to see if the dog was okay. He was chained up on the side between the house and the pasture. So I barely opened the door, and I said, Pete. And I heard his chain move on the house. And I said, good boy. Be quiet. And I shut the door and I locked it. So I knew that the dog had made it through the night. He made it through. They didn't eat him. And I felt kind of confident that if they were hungry, they would have eaten my dog. And I didn't know what they were. And my husband came home 2 days later. But before this, the very next day, I walked out and I looked, and you could see where the grass was mashed down. You could see kind of a bloody spot. There was nothing there, though. And the man that owned the cows, he would come twice a day. He'd come in the morning, he'd come at night. At that morning, he came through, and he went down to the end of the pasture where I used to live. And he has a little gate, and he goes in through there. So he went in there, and he come back. So I'm waiting for him to come back down. There's only one way in, one way out. So I'm waiting for him to come back. And when he come back, I stopped him. And I asked him, I said, I asked him how he's doing, because I never really talked to him. My husband talked to him, but I never really talked to the man. And I said to him, I said, you got any cows that are mama cows that are hurt? Because this mother cow really put a fight up. She really put a fight up. And he said, no, I don't have any. I said, are you sure? He's like, no, I'm pretty sure that I don't have any. So I looked at him and I said, well, and I started telling him about what had happened that night. And I told him, I said, there's something that ate a calf out here. And as I was telling him that there was more than one, his lips started getting white. You could see his color leaving his lips. And I showed him where it was. I said, you see that right? I was just pointing toward it. And I said, that's where it was, right by the house. I said, now, if you go there, I said, you don't take no handgun, because the handgun's not going to get it. I could tell you by the roar. I don't know what it is. It didn't sound like a cat. It didn't sound like a bear. I said, but before you get there, I said, you better take a gun and knock an elephant down. And I'm serious when I say that. And he looks at me and he says, I believe you. So he went on. He thanked me. He went on. And I'm still trying to figure out what it is. There was no internet, or I didn't have one. I didn't have nothing that nobody I could ask what it could be. I went over to the neighbor's house. They lived right across the road. And I asked them, did you hear that calf get killed? And they're like, no. And I thought, what were you, drunk? That was really, really loud. How can you not hear it? And this happened at probably about 9-ish, 10 o'clock at night. And I'm like, how can these people not have heard it unless their noise was so loud? So it's like they lived across the road, just across the road. And, like you're living in town and you live across the road from a house. That's about how close they lived from me. They never heard it. And I told them, I said, listen, there's something out here. And I said, you need to make sure you watch your kids, because this ate a calf. Yes, it was a calf, but listen, it's going to be hungry. There's more than one. They're feeding off calves. They're going to be hungry. And I knew it. They were feeding off these calves. They were going to be hungry. So my husband came home and I told him, I said, this trash can that was full of dog food, I told him, I said, bring it in the house. And he's like, no, we'll just put it on the front porch. And I'm like, that's not good enough. Listen, I'm going to tell you how much dog food. I would buy dog food for my dog. And I have never in my life seen a dog that ate so much dog food, or I thought that's what these things were. These things must have been eating the dog food, because I looked at Pete and I tell him, I said, Pete, I said, you just got to know me. I'm like, Pete, I said, now I know what you eat. I said, if I ever get hungry, you're the first one I'm going to eat. I'm telling my dog this, and he's like looking down. And it's like he understood what I was telling him. This happened before, because my dog would go through so much dog food. And what these things were doing is they must have been in the dog food somehow or another. So I started feeding Pete dog. I would feed him in his big pan. And when he didn't finish it, I would bring it in the house. And I'm just looking, I'm realizing that these things must, whatever, somehow or another must have been eating his dog food in his pan is what I assumed. So my husband, he came in and he put the big, I don't know, I think it's about 100 gallons or something. You can put 2 50-pound bags of dog food in it. And he was putting it up underneath the porch. And I said, that's not good enough. Cover it up. So he covered it up with a tarp. What if they knocked it over or what? I'm like, I don't want to attract any more animals up here. And he didn't believe me. My husband did not believe me. And he looked at, I said, ask the kids, okay? I was kind of disgusted because, it's like he didn't believe me. And I don't lie, really. I'll tell you straight out. I don't care how bad it hurts. I'm going to tell you the truth. And it's like, okay, we've been married all these years and you're not going to believe that there's something out here. But he did believe. I said, I guess it's a cat. And I would told the kids, I said, it has to be a large cat. That was the only thing that I could put my finger on to make them scared. But I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was that made that noise. It just didn't sound like a cat. And I told my husband, I said, it didn't sound like a cat. So I worked second shift. And I'd go out there and feed that dog because I didn't trust my husband enough not to just leave the dog food out there, because I'm thinking, you got to pick the dog food up. You can feed him twice a day, but you have to pick the dog food up. Do not leave any excess food outside. I don't want to draw these critters back up here because they're going to be hungry really, really soon, because this is why I knew they were going to be hungry. The man the very next day that I told about the calf getting killed, all of a sudden, early that very next, soon as sunrise, there was a long haul trailer, that cattle trailer, went by the house, and it was full of men. And then there was another trailer. It was a shorter trailer following. And that man removed every cow from that pasture. He loaded it down. All the men that was with him, I never seen these people. I don't know where these guys didn't even look local, but they must have been. They had some serious look on their face when they drove by. So I watched. I watched to make sure, see what they were doing. And when he got all the cows loaded, the man that owned the cows walked to the end of the pasture toward the house. And when he got about, I'd say about 30 feet from where I showed him that calf was, he motioned the men to stop. And the men were carrying guns that looked just like that stupid goose gun of mine. The barrels were that long. They were huge. And he motioned to the men to stand. He took both of his hands and he motioned them to stand. And he walked. And I could have swore that man was tiptoeing, but I couldn't put my finger. But the way he walked very quietly up to this area. And when he got close enough, he leaned over where this calf was. And you could smell dead, rotten, bloody, dead stuff. You could smell it. I mean, you could tell it was slaughtered there. He shook his head up and down. And instead of turning around and walking away like you would assume, this guy walked backwards until he came up to the men, and they all quickly turned and left. This man was very scared. I think he really knew what was happening in this area. So I'm worried because my kids get on bikes. They ride up and down the lane. The young boy that lived across the road, he was always up and down the lane. And it wasn't a very long lane. It wasn't long. I mean, there's like 3 houses, maybe 4, and that's it. And I was worried about my kids. So when I fed the dog before I went to work, I was waiting for him to get done. And when he got done, I'd pick his dog food up and I'd bring it into the kitchen and they'd just sit on the counter, you know. And I made a note because my husband was off doing something. I don't know what it was. I left a note for him. I said, now, feed him tonight, because my husband is you feed your dog twice a day kind of person. I said, if you feed him tonight, I said, make sure you pick his dog food up. You don't want those critters coming back because they're going to be hungry because there's no more calves out there, no more cows out there. So I started watching. So I was washing dishes that week. It was about that week. Had to have been that week. I was washing dishes. I thought I'd seen something one day. So I thought, well, hey, they're still in the neighborhood. So the next day I went out to feed my dog before I went to work again. And I seen the end part of two of them across the pasture. I seen two shadows. You can see, sort of. It was the tail end part of it. It's like, oh my God, they're so fast. Two of them went by. And I thought, hey, they're here. So I went back in the house, quickly got my binoculars, and I sat on the back porch. And the dog, he was sitting on his house. We had built him a house that he can get on it. Like if the ground was wet or something, he can get on top of his house. And he was watching. He was sitting there, and he must have seen him go by the first time because he was looking that way. The dog was. So I thought, they're going to go back through here because it was like a waterway and tree lines in this pasture. And it curved around, and they had like a watering hole in the middle of the pasture. So it was like, it kind of like did a V or something there. Anyways, I'm watching, and I see three of them run by very fast. And I thought, what the heck is that? And they were gray. They weren't, it looked like a tree, like an oak tree gray. They were colored gray. And they were strange looking. They were very graceful, but they did not run like a cat. And this is with binoculars. They were so fast that I couldn't put my finger on and say, get a detail. And I thought, what in the world is that? That's not a cat. They didn't run like a cat. They were graceful, smooth. They didn't run like a cat. And I could not put my finger on what I just saw with binoculars. And as I sat there thinking this, one of them turned around. It had to have. He started walking back. I saw it. He started walking back toward this opening, but that was between the trees. It was underneath this tree. I'm looking at it. It walks back, and it turns toward me, and it starts walking toward me. And I have never seen an animal. And I thought, what in the heck is that? As I'm watching it, you could see its nose twitching, like it was smelling the air. And I'm looking through binoculars and I'm watching this thing. And it was like, there's a film that's out. They say it's a hoax, and it's an old film, but this thing runs around, and they say it's a hoax, and the guy had a ghillie suit. But here's the thing about that film that reminded me of what I was looking at. It was its shoulders. This thing had massive shoulders, like bowling ball huge. It was very wide, like a pit bull. You know how a pit bull is really, it's got huge, massive chest. This thing had a massive chest. And I'm like, that is no cat. By no means, it's not a cat. Its eyes, I want to say, was golden, and it come right out very deliberately in the sunlight. And I didn't know what I was looking at. And then it did something that it did something that was impossible in my mind. It's like it started standing up. And you could see the legs was like bowed, the The leg part was bowed, and the shoulders on this thing, it looked like it got bigger as it stood. Apparently, when you look at it when it's standing up, it was so massive that it looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his glory days. It had a very thin waist on it, and it V'd out. It went down into a V. It had a thinner waist than the shoulders, and it had ears like a dog, but like I want to say a Doberman, sort of. That sharpness of a Doberman. It was a huge canine creature. It wasn't no bear. It had a snout. It had teeth. And I looked at it, and it was gray, and it had scraggly hair, like on how a man has just sporadic hair on his chest? This thing had sporadic hair on its chest, gray. And there was no distinction from, like, no black in it. It just looked like a tree trunk gray. Its neck was so huge that I couldn't take my arms and put it around its neck. And I'm a grown woman. I could not put my arm around its neck. It was so huge. And as I watched it, it was swaying back and forth. Now this is happening, and I'm in shock. I don't know what this thing is. I'm like, oh my God, this thing is around here. It's not a cat. It's got dog ears. And as I was watching it, it got taller. It's like it set up, how a dog will beg? It's almost like it did the beg thing and it started doing that sway back. And it got taller as it was swaying back, like shifting back and forth. Its body was kind of like moving back and forth, side to side. And it got bigger and bigger. And I'm like, its arms. I could not see its hands like a dog. But it had its arms bent like a dog will beg. You know how a dog will put his hands up and beg? It had its arms begging to that, whatever that was. And I'm just looking at the shoulders, and I can't identify this thing. And it's looking right at me. And it's huge. And all of a sudden, its ears click back like a horse that's mad and is fixing to bite you. Its ears clicked back, and I knew, oh my God, that this thing was mad then, because his ears went back. And soon as its ears went back, my dog, which I didn't know it was my dog, he jumped off his doghouse and he started pacing back and forth. But when he made a noise, because his chain hit, we had a metal piece that was on the doghouse, and his chain hit that when he jumped off, and it made a really loud noise. So I'm thinking, they're back. They come up, because I'm looking through a pair of binoculars, and I'm thinking they come by the peripheral, these animals, and I'm so scared by them, because I'm thinking they're here. They're going to attack. So I dropped my binoculars, and I turned my head to see, and realized it was my Rottweiler. And my Rottweiler started whining, and he was pacing back and forth, crying, just whine. Very odd. He never acted like that. I'd never seen him act that way, but he was whining. I don't know if that creature made a noise, a growl, or what. Whatever it was, when the ears clicked back, it must have made a noise, because that's when the dog started getting down and pacing and being scared. So immediately I picked the binoculars back up, and I focused, and it wasn't there anymore. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I've lost it. I looked, could not find it. I dropped the binoculars trying to find it in case it's coming toward me, because I'm thinking these things were so fast when they went by. There's no way I could get from the setting position that I was in and into the back door. There's no way I could do it in time. If I did, I was going to be very lucky, because when its ears clicked back, I knew I was in trouble. It was very deliberate. This thing, when it come out the tree line, it come back deliberately. It was very deliberate motion. I don't know. But when it looked at me and its ears clipped back. I was warned. I was so warned by then. I get very fearful when I think about it. So when I lost it in the vision, I'm thinking it's running toward me. So I dropped it and I could not find it. So I saw something I didn't know what it was. And I was scared because I'm thinking my kids go out. This is during the middle of the day and these things are still out moving around. And I noticed the cows' pattern had changed. I thought, well, maybe it had something to do with the weather because they used to be up underneath the trees. Like in the summertime, it was really hot. It was like, and they would kind of like hang out under the trees, tree lines, and it was kept them, kept it pretty cool. And I noticed that their pattern had changed and they were starting to stay up under the trees by the house. So even at night, usually, I don't know where they used to go at night, but they started staying up by my house at night. The cows did. So I noticed this change in the pattern of the animals. So this thing, and I forgot to mention that man that owned those cows, he told me that he did have 3 or 4 calves that was missing before I told him that there was one that was gone that had been eaten out there. And he said that he had 3 or 4 of them at least missing. So this has been going on for the fall anyways. So, I had my husband take the dog food because if this thing can stand up, it can get into anything. I figured dogs are pretty smart. This was canine. It had ears like a dog. I raised big dogs. It was canine and it stood up. It had hair that hung off its arms, 6 inches, like scraggly long hair on it. And I never could tell if it had a tail. If it had a tail, it tucked its tail like a whippet will tuck its tail up underneath itself. It either tucked its tail. It wasn't a tail that you could really tell. I think it tucked its tail. That was the only thing I could think of. Because I never seen, like when the 3 ran by, you could not see like this long flowing tail. All you could see is the graceful elegance, quickness of it, and it wasn't cat-like. And when that one, the one that showed itself, but when it come back through, it walked very slowly. It was walking very slowly on a side angle. It looked like one of those spotted hyenas. Like the shoulders were higher than the back. And it was like the shoulders were high on it, like a hyena, like the hind hips were shorter than the top part of it. And it reminded me of a hyena in a way, like that crazy hyena cartoon with the crazy cousin that has the teeth that's drooling and he's crazy, that it's like a cartoon with the teeth. It had teeth like that. It reminded you of a hyena. It was all great. There wasn't a spot one on it that I could tell, like nothing distinguishing like a dog spot or a speckle from a hyena or anything like that. It took that shape of a hyena, except it was a lot broader. When it turned toward me and it started walking out in the sunlight, it had massively wide chest. It was like huge. And then when it started to stand up, it got even bigger because then you had the definition of the smaller waist of it, You realize that what is this? It's huge. And then you realize it's got ears. It's got ears. It's not no bear that you could say it's a bear. I've never seen a gray bear either. I only seen brown, but I don't know. This thing was gray. So I could not tell you what it was. When my husband came back from his trip, he was going to go back to work. He had been off work for his arm. He had hurt his arm and he had to recoup on it. And he went back to the farm. So he went back on the farm in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks' time, we moved from there. And the little boy that lived across the street, he come out when I found out what these things were. I still didn't have a name. And I told the little boy, he come over and he started to ride down the lane. I'm like, oh my God, these things are out during the day. So I told him, I said, hey, come here. So he came over to the house and I said, did your mom and dad tell you about these things that are out here? And he's like, they said something to me. I said, well, hey, it ate a calf in less than 30 minutes, well less than 30 minutes. And I said, there's at least 3 of them. And he looked at me and he had fear on his face. I don't know if his mom and dad had been talking about it or what, but he said, well, what is it? And I looked at him. I said, hey, your dad works out in the woods. His father was the man that lived across the street. He lumbered. They go in and they cut lumber down. So this guy was familiar with the woods. And I looked at the little boy and I said, you better ask your dad what's in the woods. I said, it didn't sound like no cat. This is before I seen these things. So the little boy went home and got off his bike. So that concerns me that people still live in that area. Those things, they haven't disappeared. Now, they might move around in the area, but they have not disappeared. They're still there. And if they will eat a calf, they will eat a person. Sorry. Food is food. So I was really concerned about my kids being there. And when I found out that we were going to move back onto the farm, I felt so much better. But I never knew what it was. And I worked with a lady that lived down the very first house on that road. I worked with her on the same line. I worked at a meat packing plant, and she was an Indian, full-blooded, looked like. I'm pretty sure she was full-blooded. I forgot what, Cherokee or something. I don't know. Anyways, I told her, I said, hey, and I told her what happened. And she didn't even want to talk to me about it. She said, we don't talk about that. And I said, so you don't know what that is? And she said, we don't talk about that. We don't say what that is. And she whispered to me, skinwalker. And I realized what it was after she said, because I was trying to get a name. I wanted to know what the heck did I just see? There's at least 3 of them, because I was telling her, there's at least 3 of them. And I was telling her, she didn't have an animal, but I was telling her, beware of this. And she got really scared. Her eyes got really huge. But she didn't want to talk about it. And she whispered skinwalker to me. And I realized that it was a Indian thing. It was their belief that skinwalkers will come back or something. You can't say their name or whatever it is. But she did call it a skinwalker. I told the one that lived across the street, and I told the lady that lived down the road. So, hey, yeah, I got everybody on the block. I told everybody I could that there was something there. And now I didn't know what it was. And this was before I realized what it was. But when I found out I was going back home, I was really comforted because I didn't want my kids around that. And from there, I didn't go camping anymore. And I didn't realize how prominent they were. I didn't know what they were. I mean, I could not tell you what I saw. When my husband goes hunting, I tell him, now, there's things out there in the woods. I knew it wasn't a Bigfoot because I seen the one, I forgot. It was a Bigfoot that moved around a long time ago. I seen that, and I'm like, no, this thing had ears. This was mean. This was an animal. This is canine. This was a predator. A predator is a perfect name for this.
I'd say it is. It sounds to me like everyone living in that area might have known about those dogmen before you did.
I don't think the Indian lady knew. She looked shocked, but scared nonetheless, from tradition, I guess. But the farmer knew. The little boy's dad that worked out in the woods must have said something because he was very scared afterwards. So I think his dad knew of something. And all those farmers, they were very serious. Like, these people didn't just go, like, we've had cows that got killed before, you know what I'm saying? But there was not fearful watching, you know what I'm saying? These men were very, I don't know how to put it, very stern. They had something there that they were trying to take control of and move their cattle and protect themselves. You could tell they were very concerned. All the men that were in the trucks that went by, they were very concerned. And it wasn't just for the cows. They were concerned about the area, I believe. And these were new signs that I saw when I moved in. These were not old signs. There was new boards, like it was new boards with painting on it. These were new. And I don't think these things were in this area per se before that. I think when I moved there, I think they must have been there because why else would this, I'm going to call him a rancher. This rancher paled as I was telling him. So it had to have been something that made him fearful before this. Not just some old girl on the side of the road told him, And I never was scared of animals. Even the bear. Now, yeah, I kept my distance from the bear. They got these long, huge claws on them, and you could tell by the roar. It's like, no, this thing cuts off and it comes across mine. I'm going to be eating me some bear because I like to taste the bear, I'll nail him before he gets to my house because I live close to my sister. So it's like I knew what these big animals are, and I was never fearful until I seen that and the grace of their movement, the quickness of their movement, and not knowing what it is. So when I heard of Bigfoot, I wanted to know a little bit more because it's like, hey, whatever that was, it's not no Bigfoot, but if that exists, Bigfoot exists. I'm sorry, it just does. And I never watched like scary movies. I never said, werewolf. No, that never crossed my mind because I hate scary shows. I didn't watch scary shows even as a young person, I never thought werewolf, but it looks like the picture of yours with it's got that hump on it above its head, like there's a mane of hair, like that hyena's got that mane of hair that runs down. It had a hump on its shoulder. It had massive shoulders, but above its head, it had either it was skin or it was a hump of some sort there. That don't look like a dog. When it stood up, it looked like a dog, but when it was like, it kind of like had a bent figure of it when it was looking at me, because it was looking at me then. And when it partially come up, it still looked like it had a bow in its body, and you could see that hump on its shoulder, like it's either hair, tufted hair like a mane, or it was skin. I'm not sure, but it was above its ears, but the ears clicked up on both sides of it. So, but it still could tell there was a hump of some sort right there of hair or skin. And I'm not for sure, but it probably was both. I don't know. I still didn't know what them things were until I listened to your show and somebody said ears, and I'm thinking, ooh. That's when I got scared. Like, I moved to Mississippi. My husband hunts in Mississippi, and I'm thinking, I heard about, was it Taylor, Mississippi, or someplace? And my husband's going out there hunting, and I'm like, trying to explain to my husband that there's creatures out there. And personally, yeah, I realize that they bleed. You can kill them, but you better know what the heck you got, and you better have a gun that's going to be big enough if you're getting attacked. And I was always worried that when my husband goes hunting, deer hunting out in the woods, that these things are there, and I worry, not so much is the Bigfoot. I'm sure there might be a rogue one out there, you never know. An animal is an animal. You don't know, but these animals were predators, and I really fear meeting up with another one. I don't even really want to go camping. I've got a tent, and I swear to God, it's just getting old. I mean, I haven't gone camping since then. I don't even really want to go to a state park. If I did, I'm going to be in the middle of the park, and I'm going to be fully loaded. I'm carrying every gun. I'm sorry. It's like I don't even want to go into an area that I feel like, or how that you have a gut instinct. That gut instinct of you're being watched, or that if I so much as come across a smell like I smelled, I have not forgotten the smell of rot, blood, and something else, as I did when I lived there. So it's like they eat, they kill, and they get blood on their mane, and it just lives on them. They don't wash it off or something like that. So it's putrid. It's like putrid, rotten blood. Definitely got that tainty blood smell in these things. And if I so much as smell that now, I would probably just freak out. I want to move back, not there. And that's the only thing that makes me not want to move back to Arkansas in that area. My husband loved that area, but I don't want to move back to that area because of that. And if I felt like, because I live in a town right now, pretty moderately town, If I felt like one was around me, I would move. I wouldn't hesitate to move because I know what they do and what they cause. And I don't feel like a person has a chance, not much, meeting up with these things if they're hungry. But there's some kind of wisdom to them. I've raised dogs, and there's some very intelligent dogs. Very intelligent dogs. This one had a calculation about him that you don't see so much in a dog. I mean, you might have a dog that's pretty smart and knows a lot of tricks and he can teach himself. But there's a calculation here in these animals. They can reason, think, almost like a person, if not more, because they have the natural instinct of the wilderness about them. There's definite intelligence, calculation. It was very deliberate. When this thing turned around and come back, it was very deliberate. And you could see his nose just wiggling. His nose was moist. It was black nose. And you can just see him sniffing the air, trying to catch my scent. I don't know what their abilities are, but there must be very strong. And I do think, gut instinct, you got to listen to that. I do think the military moved these things on purpose because lightning scares a dog. And they would only do these night maneuvers during that period of time. They didn't do them all the time because I thought, are they for real in the middle of the night doing night maneuvers during an electrical storm? This is the most craziest time ever. These were jets. You could tell these were fighter jets they were moving these things with. They went in one direction. It's like they would go over and all of a sudden in a wave they would go over again when they were doing these night maneuvers. And I do think they pushed them from an area to that ledge of that. It's a kind of a cliff that goes up and the people live above the cliff, but there's a few that live underneath it. But I think they pushed them up in that area. I think they moved them. I think they know they're there. I think that was very deliberate because why else would they do night? I mean, I know they got to train for everything. I realize that, but they didn't do it all the time. When I moved on to other, no, it stormed, but no, this was and that's when the trouble started. It was like, they pushed them up in that area because they only came in one direction and they were flying very low and they were fighter planes, jets. They were moving them in that area. So I know that there's like a hunting area, like you can go and hunt. My husband and I talked about, him hunting, in that area. Their land butts up against, it has to be let me explain this a little bit better. All I know is that area is a no-fly zone. It belongs to the military. Now, whether they own the land or they have a perimeter, I'm not sure. I'm not that up on that. But I do know that this area is a no-fly zone. You've never seen a plane, just a sporadic plane fly over. It was a no-fly zone. So it was a deliberate military move, whether it's practice or not. But I do think that's what moved them into that area. And the more I know about it and realize, of course, the internet is just awesome when it comes for information. But I do think, I never realized that they're in so many different areas. I just thought, well, that's that one area they have these creatures. I don't know what they are. They're mean as heck. No, there's too many places that have these creatures. And the sound, oh my gosh. I wished I could tell you the sounds that I was hearing the day. It was animal, but it wasn't animal. This sound was angry. It was very angry. And the man that I could hear, because his voice would come out over the valley, voice carry. And the man that lived above that, the one that got the gun, was saying to the other man, I am tired of this. Well, he said something else, but he was tired of what was going on. And he popped the trunk of his car and pulled out a shotgun. And I thought, oh, I wonder what's going on. I mean, because I couldn't put my finger on what it was or where it was. I walked outside to find this. And underneath them, because it was brush that went up this cliff, underneath him is where the noise was coming from. So it wasn't even the nothing from the house. It was, I think he was angry at this Dogman.
It sure sounds that way to me. Did the fact you didn't know what they were back then make the situation easier for you to deal with, or would knowing what they were back then have made it harder for you to deal with?
Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bliss, but it helped me to some extent. I realized that there's more things out here in this world that I didn't have an answer for, that are, if these things exist, and they do, then I didn't put nothing past like a Bigfoot or something other that I had no explanation for. I would freak out now to know what I know now. I couldn't even live in that area that had that. I would be so paranoid. I'm fearful of talking about it. I can't imagine living around it. And trust me, Vic, I pay attention to what's my surroundings. Dog food don't get left out. I live in the city. Well, on the outskirts of the city next to a train track. So it's kind of like, you don't never know. I had a fox that went by my house. So if a fox can cruise up by your house in the middle of the night, run up your driveway, one of them can be just as well. So don't put it past something that goes bump in the night. Pay attention. Listen to the crickets. If they quit cricketing, whatever that is, something's out there. It's called a predator. Yeah, I don't trust nothing now when it comes to outside. I do go out. I do go out at night, even in the city. I could not think about if I lived in Boonville. I couldn't live there, knowing that what I know. I couldn't live there because in 2 weeks' time, that was the only thing that I remember telling my mom, oh, thank God, I'm getting away from whatever that is. I don't know what that was. I said, but thank God we're moving. And I knew the area that we were moving back into did not have these that I ever was raised around. I thought it was the area. I didn't realize that it's in a lot of areas. Yeah. But I do tell people, if they're going out camping, fishing, whatever, my family. And you know what? I asked my kids about this because, they were young. And I said, hey, what do you remember about that? And the oldest one said the growl. Because, see, they didn't see them. They just heard them, killing the calf. But this is what they both said. One lives in Arkansas, one lives in Mississippi. They said, Mama, that's the only time I've ever seen you scared. And you were so scared. So fear was across my face bad. And they've never seen me scared or since. They have not seen me scared. These things scary. And I don't get scared. I don't say it to brag. I'm not braggadocious in any matter. These things, I have a right to be scared of these dogmen. Every right. And if you saw one, maybe if I seen a Bigfoot, I'd be scared too, because those are huge, I'd probably be scared. But these, I heard that thing growl. I was more scared of the growl. But then after I saw it, the growl and that together, oh, that's scary as heck. And the thing that got me more than anything is I couldn't protect my kids. I could not. I had 2 shells. I could not. And I just prayed and I said, I hope that just pray. I told the kids, just pray that they're full. Because I could hear them rip the meat. There wasn't a tuft of hair out there. I could hear them rip the meat and crunch it up. They did it right there. They did not carry it away. Did not. And you can hear flesh being ripped. That's how strong these creatures are. They ripped it. And then they crunched it up like some kind of corn nuts that you're chewing on a corn nut. That's what it sounded like. And it was nothing. It was easy for them. Vic, I just wanted to get this story out. I think, especially if you know of an area that these are in, I wouldn't trust my kids out alone. I wouldn't trust myself unless I was at least had a gun on me. And I had a license to carry at that time. So I'm familiar somewhat with firearms to that point. Like, I just don't like to carry concealed. I know that sounds crazy, but if I'm going to have one, I'm going to have one out, So, I've been licensed in Arkansas. I'd pick my license right back up if I moved in that area, without a doubt. And I might even go get it I mean, my husband has a license to carry. I can go back and get it, I guess, in Mississippi, but I don't like carrying a gun on me all the time. It's just more of a hindrance than it is protection. But I would have it for protection. And I want people to know that. I want people to know that if there's something that you can't put your finger on, that it's like, this ain't normal, and that gut instinct that you've got that tells you, hey, something's wrong. If the crickets and the noise outside all of a sudden gets quiet, if your dog starts acting odd. I used to say, man, that dog, Pete Dog, we called him Pete Dog, that Rottweiler. I have never in my life seen a dog. He would go through 50-pound bag of dog food every 2 weeks. And he was pushing that too. He was literally pushing. And I'd say, I have never seen a dog eat so much. These things were coming and getting in that big old barrel of dog food and eating his dog food. They had to have been, because I have a Rottweiler now and he don't eat nothing like that. I mean, he eats like, yeah, they eat maybe a little bit more than other dogs, but not that much. This dog was going through dog food like there was no tomorrow. And I just look at him and think, boy, if I'm ever hungry, you'll be the first one to eat, because I know what you're eating. You know, I used to tell him that, but I won't eat a dog, but you know what I mean. It's like it took everything, finances at that point in time, because my husband wasn't working. I was the only one working, and I was paying every bill, you know, at that time, because my husband was disabled. So it was like really hard. So I really noticed what we were doing with the dog food, and the dog food was just like, I didn't see how that dog was eating so much. So that's my story, Vic.
Thinking back on it, how sure are you that the signs you saw posted in your area back then were beware of dogman signs?
The big one that had the regular wood, it had ears on it. It looked like it had ears. And it was brown. It was brown in color. It wasn't gray, but it was brown. And I think it had danger or beware. It had some kind of writing on it, but I'm not, I think it said beware, but I can't put my finger. The first one I seen was solid blood red behind it and a black skull and bones. That was the very first one that I noticed. And I'm like, God, that's scary. I didn't even have to say a word, and that was scary, you know. But when I come back into that area, we would go down different ones, because we were looking for a house to rent or buy, preferably to buy. We wanted to stay in that area. So, I mean, not that far away from there was that one, and it had some either danger or beware, one of the two, and it looked like it had sharp little ears on it. So it's like, yeah. But see, if you're not aware of this is a creature or this exists, you don't know what to beware of, right? I'm just thinking no trespassing. And they sure have a fine way of saying no trespassing in that area. It's like, oh, no. They're saying, boy, this guy's unique. They don't even have to stay out on it to stay out, you know. So the other one had either danger or beware, but I'm not for sure. This has been, oh my goodness, 15 to 20 years. That's a lot of years ago. But you know, the odd thing was the man that lived next door to me, right next door on the opposite side of the Indian lady, he was so paranoid. He locked everything. And I'd say, maybe it's a little OCD. You know, people get kind of stuck and they have to lock things to feel comfortable. And I kind of wonder if something was messing with his stuff. I mean, he locked his truck. Like if he got out of his truck, he locked it. If he went into the house just to get something and he went back to his truck and he forgot something, he would go back and he would lock it. I mean, literally everything was locked. And I used to think, because when we first moved, I'm thinking, God, what's he think? We are a bunch of thieves. and I realized that people had to be comfortable in their environment. But this man was very fearful and he was not comfortable. And the more he knew of us, he still did it. And he carried a keychain around that it locked everything that the man had. Everything. So I'm thinking that somebody or something was getting in his stuff, because he lived just the opposite side next to the field. That's exactly where he lived. And he was very just locked everything up. So I'm thinking that somebody or something was messing with his stuff at one time for him to be so fearful to lock everything up.
Yeah, sure sounds to me like he knew they were there.
Yeah. I don't know why people didn't say something to us while we lived there. I mean, of course, I didn't know anybody. I moved into an area I didn't know anybody, and I started working there, and it's not a subject that comes up. It's just not a subject unless somebody's out there hanging out,
Oh, sure, and you didn't know what those signs meant. Anybody who drove past and saw those signs who didn't live there, they wouldn't have a clue what they meant, but at least you know now.
Oh my God, if I saw one now, I'd just freak. I wouldn't even go camping. Like if it was in the area, the camping area, no, no, no. It's like, oh no, that was the one passion that I love to do. I love to camp. Matter of fact, I like to hunt, but don't tell nobody, but I like just to go out in the woods. And I used to go in the woods, just to go in the woods by myself. I enjoy that. Not anymore. Because of what is out there, I will not go in the woods. Like I want to hike. No, that's totally out of the story now. Yeah, I want to go camping, but it will be in a campsite where there is no activity. I will make sure I'll ask, So I don't even like my husband going. I don't like him even going deer hunting. I'm telling him, let's go vegan. Really. Seriously. I don't want him to even go out there because I feel like you can aggravate the tar out of these creatures because they have a reasoning about them.
Yeah, they sure do seem to have one. They also seem to have a sense of vengeance like you wouldn't believe. I'm so glad they didn't seem to focus that sense of vengeance on you, thank goodness. How big do you think the dogman was that walked toward you that day?
Well, I'm not very good at distance, but I can tell you how tall a full-grown cow is underneath the tree line. And that creature that stood up, when he completely stood up, he partially stood up at first, but when he made a complete stand up, his waist was at the top of that cow's back. So however tall a cow is, that's his waist. And those were those big ones. They weren't these old little short cows. These were those blondes. I forgot the name of them. I want to say they're Charolais. They look like Charolais, but the blonde Charolais, I forgot the name of those. But they were tall cows. They weren't short cows. I want to say Charolais. You can tell them before a girl can't tell you what kind of cow name it is.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm impressed. As you know, cows that are on the bigger side, they can easily have backs that go close to 5 feet. So if the dogman's waist was about 5 feet high, then it must have been pushing 10 feet or maybe a little bit over.
They were very tall. These creatures, when they ran by, all of them, their voices all sounded different, though. When they growled at one another, there was a distinction. Like, you can tell if one dog growls and another dog in your house or something like that. There was a distinction in the growls. You could tell the distinctions of all of them. But they were all very big. And, oh my God, when I think about it, I'm like when this thing turned and he was sniffing the air and it was coming out underneath the sun, and I was just like, I was eyeballing this like there was no tomorrow. Like, what is this thing? And you could see its nose moving like it was smelling. And then when it started standing and it was kind of weaving back and forth, like the top part of it swayed, but the bottom kind of stayed that way. It's like it. I've never seen anything rock around like this, but this thing was going slowly back, side to side, left to right, And I'm like, and then it kept getting bigger. It set up like a dog that's starting to beg, and then it stood up. Yeah, it's really strange.
It sure sounds that way. After you saw those dogmen, did you ever think about letting Pete live inside the house with you so you wouldn't have to worry about him being eaten?
No. I'm sorry. I mean, a Rottweiler that was never house trained, full grown male. It did bother me though. Like it did, because I'm very attached. But like my Rottweiler now, there's no way I would even bring my Rottweiler in the house. He'd lift his leg up within a second. If you house train them, that's a different story. Or you put him in a fence. I would definitely go about putting him in a fenced area though for his protection. If I was still living in that area, I would definitely go up with the razor wire up on something, and fence him in. I would definitely do that for his safety. The one I got now, oh my God, I couldn't even imagine him being in the house. I mean, I'm serious. Now the other one, the one Pete dog, the one that's seen these and was scared of them, I did feel. But I definitely would have put him in a fenced area. I definitely would have fenced him in at night, especially at night. He definitely would have been pinned. Up high pen, not a short pen, a high pen. With the top. Pinned with the top. I definitely would have pinned him in to keep those critters away from him. I kind of wonder what they were doing up by the house to make it smell dead back there. I mean, were they petting my dog? What died back behind my house, the first house? What was dead back there? I kind of wonder about that. I mean, because it was directly around his pen. It's like, well, maybe one was in the area and we were smelling the wind off of it. I think the mark that was on that weathered building, it directly went to where that dog food was at. It took the building that we had switched, because that building was full of windows and things like that. And we put the thing in there. And I think it was getting that dog food, and it marked that area that had the dog food.
If your neighbors would have told you about dogmen being around that area, would you have believed them before you had that first experience?
Yeah, I'm pretty game. I mean, if they said a werewolf, I probably wouldn't have, thinking TV, okay? But if they said an animal, yeah. Oh, absolutely. An animal. But if they would have said werewolf, like it's some kind of movie thing, I'd probably look at them like, oh yeah, you just fell off the fruit lat. Yeah, your apple just fell. That's just saying that I didn't think it was a fantasy. I felt like it was an animal. I didn't feel like it was some kind of science fiction stuff. And if somebody said there's a werewolf, that would have to of course, I'm very detailed about some stuff. They would have to tell me it was an animal. Because I didn't think it just fell on the earth, like appeared or something like that. It was a predator animal. But I'd seen big animals, so it was a predator animal to me. I would have believed them. But I would have asked them questions before I got there.
Well, I'm sure you would have, and I can't say I'd blame you. To this day, do you still have nightmares about them?
I never had a nightmare, but my world has changed. And I say that people go about their lives and they don't think nothing of it. But when something tragic happens, or something like seeing a dogman, their world changes. The perspective of everything. It's like I said to you earlier, if there was a Bigfoot, which I have never seen one, I would believe you. You know what I'm saying? I would believe you because I've seen a dogman. I wouldn't even think twice. Yeah, there's some things out there. We don't know what they are. If you said there was something flying around out here, I don't know, Mothman or whatever. I mean, something out there. I believe you because, hey, that is something I didn't know what it was, you know, and it was been hidden from lots of people, you know, and I think a lot of times we don't talk about it, and I think it needs to be talked about. You have to face fears in your life. You have to face fears. You have to plan in your mind. I plan now where I never planned like I would go walking in the woods. I loved it. I like going morel hunting. I used to do that. I mean, I like going out with my bow. Used to do that. I just like going out in the woods. I like the woods. I don't do that. That changed everything. These are like everyday life. This is life. This is the things that I like to do. I don't do those. I don't go like that. And I prepare if I do. And if you said that there was something out there that I never heard, never seen, doesn't mean it does not exist. I'll probably Google the tar out of it, but I would believe that you definitely seen something. Yes.
Well, when you know dogmen are out there, the world's definitely a different place. Well, it's about time for us to get out of here, Kat. Before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Yeah. I don't think looking for them is wise. I think being aware, whether you've never heard of one in your area, I think you need to be aware. Pay close attention to things that you don't have an answer for. Look for marks, look for smells, look for signs of something there, something big. I think if you go outside at night and you listen and you have that gut instinct that's telling you that something's here, or if there's no night sounds anymore where there's usually frogs croaking or something like that, or crickets or whatever, you need to pay attention. I would not personally go camping unless I went armed. And you just need to be aware that there's things out there that you might not have heard, or that it might not be documented, or however it is. There's things out there. So be prepared. Pay attention. Pay attention. Pay attention. I think a lot of times that we go, like the whole time I lived in that first house, you might have asked, what is that? Until I saw and heard, until I heard especially and started looking and then saw, I didn't have any fear. I didn't have any fear even when I smelled something dead or something made that mark or there was a beware sign, I was like, I wonder what that thing is, bad something. I didn't know what it was, but just be aware of your surroundings. Even if you live in the city, it's not going to matter. If a fox will come up to my door in the city, and they do, and they have, then those are just like any other animal that come up. If deer run through your yard, even in the city, you can expect something else could be there too. So just pay attention. Pay attention to your surroundings.
That sounds like really good advice to me. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Kat, and sharing those experiences with us. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. It helps to be able to talk about it.
Well, that's what this is all about. I'm so glad to hear it has helped. Well, thanks again so much, and have a great night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmenencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.